Hello there. Welcome to this episode of Force Ghost Conversations. This is your host, Anthony King, and this week I'm joined by my brother and sister in law, Joe and Ellie Brown, to take a deep dive look into their personal Star Wars journeys. Before we get started, I'm inviting you to join the conversation with us. We can be found on Twitter and Hive at Force Ghost Pod. You can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok just by searching Force Ghost Conversations. We look forward to connecting with you on those platforms. Also, please be sure to subscribe, rate, and review the podcast on your listening site of choice. Finally, please be sure to check out our TeePublic store to buy some Force Ghost Conversations merchandise. And without further ado, it is time to gather around the campfire for some Force Ghost Conversations. All right, everyone, welcome back to another installment of Force Ghost Conversations. And this is a really special episode that I'm really excited to share with each and every one of you. Yes, I am joined by my brother and sister-in-law, Joe and Ellie Brown, as they make their debut on Force Ghost Conversations. And I look forward to having them on the podcast for future episodes as we can possibly chat through just about anything that is upcoming in the Star Wars galaxy now that they're literally caught up with each and every aspect of Star Wars. Yes, that means exactly what that entails. They just recently finished an entire deep dive into everything Star Wars. So they started at the episode 1, The Phantom Menace, and watched everything that is canon for Star Wars right now. So they watched all the way up through Clone Wars, Bad Batch, Obi-Wan Kenobi, Resistance, Book of Boba Fett, Mandalorian, as well as all the movies and the solo projects, solo Star Wars story and Rogue One, a Star Wars story. They went through it all in order, and it is an incredible journey that they've been a part of, and I'm so thrilled that they're willing to share their individual Star Wars journeys with each and every one of us, and I hope that inspires everyone to take the deep dive into Star Wars if you haven't already, but also to share your Star Wars story too. We're all about having those conversations here on Force Ghost Conversations, and I look forward to continuing to grow the proverbial seats around the campfire that is Force Ghost Conversations, and invite you all to share your truth, your journey, and your experience with us. So look forward to continue doing more episodes like this in the future. So just some quick housekeeping before we get into the meat and potatoes of the episode. Since this is a mid-week release, we will not be covering any news in this episode. So Cloud City Gossip will be on the Sunday release, which I believe will be episode 7 of Willow, if my math serves correct. But we also will be covering Bad Batch Season 2 episodes as they are released. So get excited for that, folks, which at the time of this release, 2 episodes of The Bad Batch have now premiered on Disney Plus. So what are you doing? Go watch that as well as Willow and get ready for our further conversations later on as we get into a brand new season of Star Wars on Force Ghost Conversations. So very excited to do all that with you. And with that, I think we are ready to get into our interview here. So on the other side of this break, get ready for my interview with Joe and Ellie Brown. All right, everyone, welcome back to another episode of Force Ghost Conversations. And I am so thrilled to welcome to the show our first time guests, my brother and sister-in-law, Joe and Ellie Brown. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having us.
Yes, we're very excited to be here.
Oh, I am so thrilled to have you both here and to talk about your journeys through all of Star Wars that you've undertaken in the last year. And it's just amazing that you both were able to complete this. I know, Joe, you went through it twice this year, which is really incredible. And I want to go back to the beginning of your Star Wars journey, even before you did these like deep dives beforehand. So like before, I know, Joe, you started on this earlier than Ellie, and then when Celebration came around, you're like, we need to do this again. Ellie popped on board. I want to go back to before you both hit play the first time on all this. So tell me about your introductions to Star Wars before this recent discovery/rediscovery. What were your opinions of Star Wars, and to what degree was it an aspect of your life? Joe, let's start with you first.
So growing up, it was never a major aspect of my life. We did have, I still remember it was probably like third or fourth grade, somewhere around there, was when I first started watching or had seen the original trilogy. We had the VHS tapes with the all three of them. So
Mm-hmm.
I remember watching them. It wasn't something that I would continually watch over and over, but there were definitely, those memorable scenes that I can always look back and like, I remember when I was younger and I've seen, like the Luke and the Rancor and, the Sarlacc pit, those types of like really memorable scenes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's kind of where it started for me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Interesting. And Ellie, you didn't have the fond memories of watching them on VHS. So where did this all start for you?
Yeah, Star Wars was definitely not part of my identity in any way. If it might be fair to say I was anti Star Wars. So I was a very like black and white when I was younger, and I made all of those decisions oftentimes based off of fear. The Star Wars was very scary to me.
Yeah.
I thought it was like not a fun film for me to watch. So the only memories I really have are of a couple scenes, which I guess aren't really even big deals. And as I came to find out, one of my memories of Star Wars was actually a false memory. It wasn't true. So I had no interest in Star Wars, didn't really grow up with Star Wars other than thinking it was scary and having just a few ideas about it from just a few scenes.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, that's you both came from such different places through this, and literally, I'm not like making this up for the audience at home. I'm trying to like put in perspective for them. You both watched everything that is available as of today, New Year's Day, January 1st, 2023.
Yep.
Yes.
Anything in canon right now that is possibly available. We're talking Clone Wars, all 9 Skywalker Saga films, the 2 Star Wars story films, Tales of the Jedi, Obi-Wan Kenobi, all that stuff.
All of it.
Everything you could possibly imagine. And I know, Joe, you went through it twice this year, like I alluded to earlier. Ellie, you did it the first time. My questions right now are, why did you do this undertaking? And frankly, how did you find the time?
Yeah, I decided to do it. It wasn't really a decision. I was graciously asked / told in a loving way, in a non-dominating way, to watch Star Wars. I mean, I heard Joe's thoughts occasionally throughout it. And then it was when you and Elise went to Celebration and he was texting with you guys during that time. And he was just like, you have to watch this. Please watch this for me. And I agreed. So that's how I got pulled into it. And then finding the time was very tricky.
Yes.
So finding the time was all about, did we start before Luna or after Luna?
We started, I think it was right.
Yeah, I think Luna was like a month old at this point.
It was right after.
Yeah, so we had Luna in April, and then I guess we ran out of shows to watch because we binge watched TV when she was a newborn. And then we found pockets of time here and there. And then once she finally learned to sleep, we really got the ball rolling.
Yep.
For those at home, Luna is their young Padawan that Joe and Ellie had this past year. And we'll talk a little bit about her later on in this podcast. But Joe, you took the deep dive first here. And what kind of inspired you for that matter?
So what really got me was, the conversations you and I have had, the passion and the love for it. And this whole world that from an outsider kind of seemed
silly.
not so much silly for me, but it seemed like something that, because I was an outsider, it was kind of difficult to crack into.
Yeah.
Um, just because it's such a following, such a passion and love for it, that I didn't want to take it on and not be a part of it because I wasn't a diehard, knew word for word all the scenes, and you know,
It's rather intimidating.
it was pretty intimidating. But like I said, with the conversations you and I have had, like that passion and love, I'm like, I want to have that. I want to experience that. And so that's why, I took the first dive, and that was an undertaking, because not only prior to our daughter, we were renovating a townhome.
Mm-hmm.
So, finding time then.
And I wasn't watching it.
Yeah,
I didn't watch it at all during the first one. So,
Mm-mm.
like, we couldn't, that was like our show time. You weren't watching it.
Yeah, so it wasn't a mutual, let's sit down at the end of the night and watch some TV. It was, we went to bed, I'm staying up with headphones, watching it on my phone, or watching it, during lunch breaks. So it was especially difficult finding time my first round, because it wasn't that shared viewing between us. So
wow, I didn't even know. Like, I can just imagine Joe staying up. Ellie's like, "Are you going to bed?" No, I have to finish this Clone Wars episode first, and then another one starts, and so on. And I can just imagine it being like 2 a.m. Oh, I better get some sleep.
Yeah, I really remember the ones, getting sucked into, like, especially the series, like, Clone Wars, Rebels, where it's like, oh, it's only 20 more minutes, let me watch another one, and you just get sucked in. So
absolutely, yeah. And all right, we're in it now, okay?
yeah.
Let's in perspective here. You definitely no longer quote unquote Padawans in your Star Wars fandom. We've cut off the Padawan braid. You're ready to rock. And you both are listeners of the show. We do deep dive discussions on all the stuff in terms of Star Wars, and that's where I want to go with my next question here, is talk about more of like the general, like, themes and thematic nature of it all. And I'm curious, why do you think that you were able to connect with Star Wars during this recent rewatch and rediscovery? Was it the themes of the modern mythology, the adventure? I just kind of love to hear your thoughts. Ellie, if you don't mind taking the first stab here, I'd love to tackle this question with you both.
Yeah, I was surprised that I connected at all because I just didn't think that would be my jam.
Mm-hmm.
It was going to be something I was doing for Joe. So I ended up connecting with the random stories. Like the smallness of people and the huge impact that they have.
Yeah.
Like a random situation that has all of this impact that you see repeatedly throughout Star Wars. Honestly, to the point where I got to the movies and a part of me was like, well, let's like move on so I can get to the small unknown, like, who are these people characters?
Yeah.
But yeah, I really connected with it because it really embodied a lot of the human spirit and that human desire for identity, for family, and for purpose.
Gotcha. So you were a fan of like the TV like series, is where they're able to just spend all this time literally showing random side stories and showing C-3PO and R2-D2 going off on a side quest in the underground of Coruscant to find some fruit for Padme's dinner party or something like that, right?
Yep, so. Absolutely. Yeah, just like those random things that you're like, why would I ever need to know this? And then you look and they're built in a factory building the parts of the Death Star. And it's just like super random connections, which I love too. Like, not really Easter eggs, but just that full circle.
Yeah, brilliant. Joe, let's hear your thoughts.
So for me, it was definitely the like adventure. There's this whole universe to explore.
Yeah.
And it's great because jumping in now, there's so much more to that universe than if you jumped in with the original trilogy, or even 5-10 years ago. So there's this whole universe to explore, and that's what I loved so much, is if there's this whole universe, there's a lot to do, a lot
Yeah.
to see. um, and so that adventure, and especially like the relationships that
Mhm.
you see depicted in the films, in the shows, and then really feeling a part of that.
Mm.
That's
Mm.
what really drew me in.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I mean, like, I think we say, at least in like when I was at Celebration, there was a lot of discussion similar to how you were able to connect with Star Wars, where it was like, yeah, the lightsabers and the pew 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 blasters of it all, like the war aspect, really like is what you like. It gets you through the door, but what you stay for is like these familial relationships and the
Yeah.
connections and the larger mythology of the Force and what is this Jedi Order and who are our friends along the way, make along the way. Yeah, that's a really
Mhm.
great way to put it there. Um, so I want to talk about some of the nitty gritty of the various movies and TV shows and all that stuff that's literally come out over the, I mean, to this point, 45 plus years of storytelling in the Star Wars galaxy right now. So yeah, like I mentioned, movies, television series, animated series, all that stuff. What single piece of media would you say was your favorite and why? So we're talking like Book of Boba Fett, Obi-Wan Kenobi, Rise of
Ugh, that's a
Skywalker.
hard question.
Yeah, let's see. Joe, do you mind going first
Yeah.
here? What would you say was your favorite single thing in Star Wars that you would love to go back to right now and turn on?
For me, it has definitely been Rebels.
Mm-hmm.
Rebels has been the one that, from the very, like, I've never had a show or movie, anything, where the first 5, maybe 10 minutes,
Yeah.
you're like, I feel like a part of this group. And it
Mm-hmm.
really felt like a family. With Ezra kind of joining the group, and it's like, I could be Ezra. I could be another person they just pick up along the way, like, and I would feel at home. So it's that sense of like just family was what really drew me into Rebels, and just the development, and kind of seeing the same development, the character development, but a different path.
Mm.
So you kind of see the same thing repeat, and you're like, oh, this is what's going to happen. This is what's going to happen. And then, all of a sudden you're like, oh, it went a different route.
Yeah.
Um, and the other thing that I really enjoyed was Rebels kind of pulled in from a lot of the other shows and movies with their characters.
Mhm.
So you got a lot of appearances from, previous shows. I love Hondo. So,
Oh yeah,
yeah.
lots of Hondo.
Yeah. So, Hondo,
Different
Rex.
Hondo.
Yeah. A different Hondo.
Mhm.
um, Maul, all the greats just reappearing in this one show. So it was all of that really drew me in and made me a fan of Rebels.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, Rebels is like a greatest hits
Yeah.
of like past and
Yeah,
present and
it is.
future Star
Mhm.
Wars
Mhm.
characters all integrating at once, while also creating this new family that, I mean, I was fortunate to have been there when you first watched a couple episodes of
Yeah.
Rebels. Joe, I think you and I went through the first season and a half of Star Wars Rebels last Christmas when we were back
Yeah.
all together in one place, and I could just see on your face you were hooked. In the
Yeah.
first episode, you were like, "This, I'm in. This is a story
Hmm.
that I want to be a part of, and I just connect to this group of rebels that are fighting for justice and peace in the
Yeah.
galaxy." Yeah, yeah, great stuff. Ellie, where do you land on this scale?
I think this is a really hard question for me, and I don't think it's entirely fair
Yeah.
because I started my journey somewhat disengaged
Mm-hmm.
because I was like not really bought into it. I'm doing this for my husband, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Um, So I told Joe at some point this year we'll have to do this journey again because I would see with very different eyes and a different attitude. But to just kind of right now, I would say like Clone Wars is really up there for me, which I thought when Joe told me how many seasons of Clone Wars there was, I was like, oh my goodness, I'm never going to get through this. There's definitely dry parts of Clone Wars, but I just got to know the characters so well. It's so long. It's so random in some parts. And as someone who really had no exposure to Star Wars, like to the point where I didn't know that Han Solo existed.
Wow.
I knew of a few main characters. This is how I thought of it. Luke, his sister, and some robots.
Mm-hmm.
And then the guy with the mask. Like, who I knew was Darth Vader, but like Mask Man. That's like who I thought.
Mask
Man. So Clone Wars, I think, was such a enjoyable part of my journey because I got to spend so long with the characters. Whereas the other ones, we binge watched everything so quickly that I enjoyed it thoroughly. Like Book of Boba Fett is probably number 2 for me.
Nice.
But I didn't get, and again, I probably like Book of Boba Fett so much because I got to spend so much time with the characters because it's really centered, on them for the most part. And I like that deep dive into them, whereas the other ones, it just goes by so quickly. Like you're mentioning things about Rebels, I'm like, oh yeah, I really like that about Rebels. You could probably name any of them and I'd say, oh yeah, I really like this about that.
Right.
But yeah, I'm gonna stick with Clone Wars for right now. Ask me round 2, we'll see what happens.
Okay, yeah. So Clone Wars for now. Rewatch The Phantom Menace and then because you probably just would like different mindset entirely when you watched episodes 1 and 2, and then you got the slog of 7 seasons, 22 episodes for the first 5 of Clone Wars, and then by the end of it you're like, all right, I'm in this, I'm a fan. Then Revenge of the Sith, and you were just off to the races after that. And
I'm gonna say I wasn't a fan at the end of Clone Wars, but I was invested. I probably became a fan after the next movie, whichever one that is after Clone Wars. What's that one?
Revenge of the Sith.
Yeah. So I was a fan after Revenge of the Sith. I was invested after Clone Wars.
Good way of putting it. All right. Well, literally, because you both have been on this journey, and by watching everything, you've consumed probably more Star Wars content than I would honestly say a majority of fans who consider themselves to be Star Wars fans. Do you think that you will continue to dive further into the quote-unquote expanded universe of Star Wars, so such as books, comics, and games?
I'll let you answer that one first.
I do have plans to dive further in, just like I said earlier, with there being this whole universe, and there's so much more detail, there's so many more places and characters to explore and learn about, that's the only way that I'm going to get to know and be able to see and hear these stories being told is through those forms. So I definitely see in my future diving into the comics and the books. Currently I'm working through kind of part of that deal of getting Ellie to watch Star Wars. I'm going back reading a series that I need to currently, but afterwards definitely diving more into reading those pieces of literature, and also
you bought the game.
I bought the game recently, the Tales from the Galaxy's Edge.
Yeah, that's great.
I've played it about maybe an hour total.
Oh, good. You've been able to get a little more time with it.
A little more time, yep. It's definitely it's fun, like just kind of going off to the edge and looking over the cliff and just looking at this world.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I haven't really got to dive into the story of it yet, but
Yeah.
I'm definitely looking forward to getting a little more in depth in that.
Okay, so it sounds like you're dipping your toes now, but eventually you're gonna jump into the 12-foot section of the pool.
Mhm.
Yep.
Ellie, are you following Joe into the pool here?
So this question gives me a little bit of imposter syndrome
Mm-hmm.
because like you said, some people have not gone to the depth that we have.
Yeah.
But they are still so passionate about it. So I would be very intimidated to like bring up that I'm like super into Star Wars because they're going to say something and I'm going to be like, I don't remember that or something. So I would like to get deeper into Star Wars. In fact, I kind of feel like I'm missing out.
Yeah.
I feel like I don't know as much as I want. I remember at the end, I kept asking Joe a lot of questions and he's like, that's something that's in the comics. That's in this, that's in that. And then I also feel like I've only skimmed the surface in a way. It's like I have consumed so much information and yet I know nothing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I would like to, I'm rereading Holes right now, just because why not? But I think I would like to get into the comics, which is also new for me because I'm not into comics, have never been into comics. I don't know if that's something that I would enjoy, but also the audiobooks, that Ride to Daycare is very long. So something to try.
Yeah.
But this will be weird because I don't know how to coordinate this with you. Like I don't want to go on this journey by myself.
Yeah.
But I don't know how to coordinate it because if we're getting into reading, we are very different readers.
We are.
And if we're getting into audio books, then we have different time available. So to be determined how, but I think yes for both of us.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, good. You I think you both realize that there is yet an even larger universe.
So much. It's intimidating again. It's intimidating all over again.
It is a lot.
Well, it's great because I mean, you're not, because of all the Star Wars that you watched, a lot of people could easily be turned off from wanting to do any more into the Star Wars galaxy, and yet you're both are like, yeah, I want more. It's just, how can we logistically like do it together as a family?
I mean, as someone who has gotten overly attached to TV show characters in books, I'm excited by Star Wars because of the amount of information they have out there and different ways to consume that. It almost feels never ending. Like I don't have to close the book, which is like the worst part of being a reader of fictional literature.
Absolutely. The stories just keep continuing. And speaking of stories continuing, you both have a Padawan now, who we've alluded to earlier. Her name's Luna. How do you think that you will incorporate your fandom of Star Wars into her life as it is embarking on a new journey here?
Well, Joe and I are, when I think of this question, my first thought is, do we have a Padawan? Do we have a foundling? Because
I like what you're dishing here.
Yeah, I really aligned with more of the Mandalorian identity than I would say by the end the Jedi. Like I was like kind of rolling my eyes thinking about some of this stuff. But yeah, Joe, what do you think?
Well, because at first when we discussed this, I was like, well, the foundling, they're an orphan, and Luna's not an orphan. But then when you kind of look at a Padawan, they're
a forced orphan.
Mm-hmm. So it's like, well, let's just, Padawan.
Let bygones be bygones.
Yeah, right.
I don't. Have you had visions of how you want to introduce this to Luna?
Like we have, the blanket and Jar Jar that you and Elise got her. So continuing, just having those toys, the plush animals things around her to explore. I think having those things and just mentioning them, having them being a part of everyday or common things that we talk about here. They have like other shows and things like that eventually
just kind of like introduce characters.
Yeah.
I guess like Resistance is probably the most child friendly
at
this point. That like once she ages to like 5, 6, 7, right, that's probably like the earliest one that I imagine like what they would suggest based off of that. But like I think about this a lot, like how families introduce Star Wars to their kids, and I want to hear your thoughts. I know I didn't like prep this question or not, but if you're showing her the movies, do you start with the original trilogy or do you start at episode 1? That's always a question I have in my head, is like, do you start with the first one and then kind of get like the just to see her face for the Vader reveal? Or do you like, because I've always thought like the Anakin turn to the dark side could also be a reveal too, that could be special for a child to experience.
Devastating depending on the age group. I mean, that's my boy. I mean, I'm always going to say chronologically. I'm always going to be that person. So I think it's going to be a very unique experience for her, considering the age she's going to be at, where that's going to interest her. And I mean, the number one way for her to get into it is for us to say she can't watch it. So
I think also we've looked, and there's a couple books, like children's books, like the
5-minute story bedtime stories. It's like Star Wars, stuff like that. And then beyond that, I think experiences. So going to Disney and getting to experience what they have there. Just kind of making it part of life, where like she sees us watching and it's normalized and we're inviting her into it. And I mean, having you and Elise as her aunt and uncle, I mean, the kid doesn't stand a chance if you really think about it.
Absolutely. I have a feeling I can foresee many trips to Galaxy's Edge in her upcoming future.
Yes. Absolutely.
Well, great. And I guess my last question here for you both is, what advice would you give to someone who is thinking about taking this deep dive into Star Wars? I know you both mentioned already in this episode that it can be daunting, right? And literally in the next 3 days, there's going to be another couple of episodes to a series already. So like every day, it seems like more and more Star Wars keeps coming out. So it's like at some point you just have to just jump in. So what advice would you give to someone who may be on the fence about doing this? Joe, do you want to start?
Yeah, my advice would be take the plunge. It's definitely worth it. Because there's so much content, there's something for everyone. Regardless of what you're looking for going into it, you're going to find something that you're going to enjoy. Again, with so much content, there's going to be things you're like kind of put off, or like, oh my gosh, when is this going to end? But there's so much that you're going to enjoy that it's worth it. Like it is a huge time commitment, but I also going through it twice, it is a time commitment. But that's kind of the fun. Like knowing that there's so much. It's nice to know, like, I can watch this episode and I barely made a dent in what I'm actually, like, all of the content. So
you just kept saying to me like, oh, you have so much left. There's so much story on that.
Yeah. And so, there's a lot of it in there that is definitely really rewatchable. Like go back and rewatch some of the series or the movies. Some of it, for me, rewatch a little bit better than others, but you find what you love and you're fine with rewatching that same series over and over. Just like any other movie or series, like you fall in love with it for a particular reason and just binge watch it over and over. So that's what I love about Star Wars is it has something for everyone, and you will find something that you would want to binge watch.
Yeah, and I'm sure you found things in your second viewing that you didn't catch on
Oh
your
my god.
first time through it.
Yeah, the second one, I enjoyed the second one so much more because I fell in love with the characters all over again.
Hmm.
You got to listen to my nonsense theories.
Yeah.
As I as well.
Yep, I got to listen to the theories on what's going to happen or who this person is, and it's like, oh, only if you knew, only if you knew.
Smug.
You're like, we'll
That's-
see if that pans out. Yeah, Ellie, what do you think?
I did give advice for someone to watch it. I gave them like the same website that Joe used to like do all the
Wow.
like how to watch it and everything. I don't think they ever started it. They probably looked at it and was like, this is too much. I guess the nice thing is that for me, like someone who's very stubborn and someone who likes to do things in order,
Mhm.
there's no option to not watch everything.
Yeah.
But you almost tried to get me to not watch The Resistance. I'm just going to put it out there. I'm going to blow up your spot in front of Anthony.
Ooh, hot
He's
take,
like, you don't
Joe.
really need to watch it.
Because at that point, it's like you're so close to another chunk of like just fantastic material, and you're like,
Mhm.
I just want to get through Resistance. Like, I want to watch the the movie, like the last three. So it's like, let's hurry up. Do we really need to watch this? I just like I didn't want it to be over, but I wanted her to experience those movies and what she's about to
Yeah.
learn.
You were just anticipating what was already coming, and you were just ready to just jump through that door.
Yep.
Yeah, it wasn't that that's your least favorite one and that you didn't want to watch it
Well,
again.
I think it's also because we've had this conversation, like Resistance is so unlike the rest of it
Mhm.
that it is a good refresher. But when you're in that zone of I'm watching Star Wars and you hit Resistance, you're like I know what's coming and I want to get there.
Oh yeah.
So
You're
I
just
think
like,
that's why it's my least favorite because I love the characters in there.
Yeah, you got to breathe. You got to come
Yeah.
up to the air
hmm
supply sometimes. Take
yeah,
that.
you were like at the top of a roller coaster, anticipating making that big drop there into the
Yeah.
the action adventure, and you're just like,
Mhm.
we're
Yeah.
almost there. Get us to the finish line.
But I guess the nice thing and what I would tell people is if that's not your jam, if binge watching hours and hours of content isn't for you, there's parts of it that are for you.
Hmm.
Like you said earlier, there's a lot of people who consider themselves die-hard fans who have not seen everything. And maybe it's because they don't like animation or they don't like one season stories. They like multiple things, or maybe they just like movies. I guess if it's not for you, I would say move on to the next thing that does and see if that's for you, because eventually I would guess that something's going to hit home and it's going to give you a reason to go back, a desire to go back, because I wouldn't have done it without Joe.
Yeah.
So everyone has to find their own thing for what it is that gets them to do it.
Find your Joe is basically
Find your Joe.
Find your Joe that kind of helps you along, guides you along the journey, and, and is the source of comfort along the way as you go through your individual Star Wars journey. Well, thank you both so much for coming on to the podcast. I know this has been in the works for quite some time, and as soon as you both finished Joe, your second journey, and Ellie, your first journey, I knew I had to get this raw kind of just have an honest conversation with you both about how you both went through this incredible metamorphosis with Star Wars, and how literally it's now more part of your lives than literally ever before.
Definitely.
So I just thank you from the bottom of my heart for coming on the show and sharing your truth with us and with our listeners. And I hope that your story is able to inspire others to not only take a deep dive into Star Wars, but also to share their stories in the future as well.
Yeah, this was really fun.
Yeah.
I really liked coming on here. Thank you for inviting us.
Of course. Well, we will look to have you on again in the future. We will keep checking in on your Star Wars journeys wherever they may go in the future here. And to those of you at home, thank you for listening to this episode of Force Ghost Conversations. Be sure to share the show with your friends and continue to grow the seats around the proverbial campfire that is Force Ghost Conversations. And you can connect with us on all the social media platforms. Just search Force Ghost Conversations and we'll be there in some capacity. And with that, we'll be back in your podcast feeds very soon, probably discussing Willow or something in the Star Wars galaxy. So be on the lookout for that. And until then, may the Force be with you. Thank you.